Shalom. The essay we shall discuss in this final lecture, Hurban ha-Nefesh, was published in the Hebrew literary journal Moznaim in the winter of 1933-1934. It was written in the immediate aftermath of Hitler's rise to power in Germany. It provoked a fierce polemic among its readers when it first appeared, and it retains its power to challenge and to provoke. The essay was collected in Kaufmann's volume Bechevlei Hazman, in the Bonds of Time, which gathered his political and cultural essays. It represents Kaufmann not as a scholar of the ancient world, but as a contemporary Jewish intellectual wrestling with the catastrophic crisis of his own moment. The intellectual context of the essay is important. By 1933, Kaufmann was living in Eretz Israel for 5 years, working as a high school teacher in Haifa and observing the development of the Zionist enterprise. What he saw troubled him deeply, and he focused on the issue of anti-Semitism. As we did in previous lectures, I would like to read some of Kaufmann's sentences in Hebrew and then in English. Kaufmann writes about anti-Semitism like this: האנטישמיות אינה שנאת ישראל בעצם, אלא היא שיטה של קטרוגים הבאה לבסס ולהצדיק את השנאה לישראל או את הרע הנעשה לישראל. האנטישמיות כרוכה ברגש השנאה, אבל כשהיא לעצמה אינה רגש אלא אידאה, תורה, ולפרקים גם מין שיטה מדעית. אולם האנטישמיות בתור שיטה אינה שואפת לבאר את שנאת ישראל, אלא להצדיק אותה. היא נותנת לשנאה טעמים שאינם טעמיה וגורמיה האמיתיים. And in English, anti-Semitism is not hatred of Israel in itself, but is a system of accusations that comes to justify and legitimize the hatred of Israel or the evil done to Israel. Anti-Semitism is bound up with the feeling of hatred, but taken in itself is not a feeling but an idea, a doctrine, or something, or sometimes a kind of scientific system. But anti-Semitism as a system does not aim to explain the hatred of Israel, but to justify it. It gives the hatred reasons that are not its true reasons and causes. Kaufmann opens the essay by describing the 4 classical maneuvers of anti-Semitism: fabrication, inventing crimes that Jews have not committed; generalization, attributing the sins of individuals to the entire collective; particularism, treating ordinary human failings as specifically and distinctively Jewish; aggravation, condemning in Jews what is permitted or tolerated by others. Because anti-Semitism is a doctrine, Kaufmann observes it can exist independently of actual hatred. There are non-Jews who are anti-Semitic in their views without harboring personal hostility toward the Jews they know. And here Kaufmann's argument takes its most provocative turn. Anti-Semitism can even become a constitutive principle for good and loyal Jews. The central and most explosive argument of Hurban ha-Nefesh is the claim that a significant current of modern Jewish thought, including elements of the Zionist movement, have internalized the accusations of anti-Semitism and built upon them, deploying them in the service of Zionism. The origin of this internalization, Kaufmann argues, lies in the Haskalah, the Jewish Enlightenment movement of the 18th and 19th centuries. The Haskalah accepted the accusation, advanced by both governments and anti-Semites, that Jews were morally and culturally corrupted, and that this justified the denial of their rights. Some Haskilim agreed with this analysis in broad outline and drew from it the conclusion that Jews needed to be fixed, or to fix themselves, to abandon their distinctive language and dress, to enter productive occupations, to assimilate culturally. They would thereby earn the rights they were being denied. Kaufmann singles out the Hebrew poet Yehuda Leib Gordon as a representative of this stance. Gordon's poetry repeatedly confesses the truth as Kaufmann says, of anti-Semitic accusations, acknowledging Jewish cultural inferiority. Kaufmann quotes from Gordon verse, again, first in Hebrew and then in English. הן אמת יעקב כי עד כה נועלת, החזקת בסכלות, חוכמה גאלת, ויהי לחם ביתך עקבה ונשך, ותצדק גידופים חרפות שטניך. Indeed, Yaakov, you have been foolish until now. You held fast to folly, wisdom you spurned. Your livelihood was explosion and usury, and you justified the curses of your haters. The Maskilim did not perceive, Kaufmann argues, that by accepting the anti-Semitic framework, even in a reformed and moderate version, they were building their cultural program on a foundation that was inherently hostile to Jewish dignity and self-respect. The truth they were confessing was an anti-Semitic truth framed by enemies and accepted without critical examination. More shocking to its original readers and no less relevant today was Kaufmann's argument that the elements of Jewish nationalism, including the Zionist movement, had fallen into the same trap. He writes, the national movement itself was not spared the influence of anti-Semitism. On the contrary, it even endeavored to base the national movement itself on a system of false accusations that had received from anti-Semitism. Nationalist anti-Semitism went on to become a system. With a kind of morbid appetite, nationalist thought accepted the anti-Semitic idea and sought to build upon it the negation of exile. Yes, indeed, the Jew is guilty. There is a grain of justice in the hatred of Israel. The Jews of exile are indeed worthy of hatred. Their customs, their inclinations, their occupations, their relationship to their surroundings, etc., these are the source of the hatred, the justified hatred, and therefore one must escape from exile, etc. Kaufmann identifies two specific accusations that nationalistic anti-Semitism has observed. The first is the claim that the life in exile is inherently immoral in the national sense, that to live outside one's national homeland is a form of degeneration and impurity. Kaufmann's objection is not to the Zionist aspiration of national redemption, which he fully shared. His objection is to the double standard. Immigration and diaspora existence and cultural adaptation are perfectly normal for all other peoples, but are condemned as uniquely shameful when practiced by Jews. The second accusation is the social one. The Jews are parasites, that their economic occupations are dishonorable and unproductive, that they avoid physical labor and live at the expense of others. This accusation, which was central to a great deal of anti-Semitic propaganda, had been observed by significant Zionist thinkers, which argued that the abnormal occupational structure of diaspora Jewry was a source of anti-Semitism and a cause of Jewish moral corruption. Kaufmann attacks this argument with devastating force. Again, let us read a few sentences in Hebrew and then in the English translation. כי מהו יסוד הערכתה, השקפה שאין שום בן דת מאמין בה כיום, נכונה היא רק ביחס ליהודים. מותר להם לגויים להיות חנוונים ובנקאים, אבל אם היהודים עוסקים באלה הם פרזיטים. חנות היא סימן מובהק לקטריאל יבכה, כי בלונדון, בפריז, בפקין, בטוקיו וכולי אין כידוע חנויות כלל. What is the foundation of this valuation? An antiquated view of commerce and money changing that no sensible person believes today. Correct only with respect to Jews. Gentiles are permitted to be merchants and bankers, but if Jews engage in these things, they are parasites. Shops, or a shop, is a sure sign for Katrielevke, the shtetl existence, because in London, Paris, Beijing, Tokyo, etc., there are, as everyone knows, no shops at all, and one can feel Kaufmann's cynicism over here. The irony is cutting. The accusations that anti-Semites deploy against Jews, that they are merchants, that they avoid agricultural labor, are accusations that can apply with equal force to many other peoples and groups, but only for the Jews they are considered a sin. The essay's title refers to the psychological and spiritual damage inflicted by the internalization of anti-Semitic accusations. Kaufmann argues that this chronic self-hatred, whether under the banner of enlightenment, assimilation, or Zionist negation of the exile, destroys national self-respect, without which no genuine movement of liberation is possible. Kaufmann warned, the poison of anti-Semitism seeps into us like a venom, poisoning the roots of our soul through an oppressive and depressing sense of inferiority, consuming within us every feeling of self-respect, and worst of all, it spreads its evil spirit upon our children, sends anti-Semitic phrases out of their mouths, roots deep in their souls, the bitter feeling that their people is an inferior people, criminal and suffering from its crimes. Kaufmann observes with horror that in the Jewish world of his time, it is possible for a young person to refer to the Jewish people as rotten and its occupations as degraded before an audience of teachers, parents, and students without any rejection or protest. Against the nationalistic anti-Semitism he describes, Kaufmann proposes an alternative foundation for Zionist self-understanding, one that he regards as both intellectually honest and psychologically healthy. The true foundation of the aspiration of national redemption, he argues, is not shame of Jewish immorality, but clear-eyed historical understanding of what exile actually is. Exile is not a moral condition, but a historical one that placed the Jewish people in a permanent condition of national alienhood. The evils that flow from this condition, the lack of legal status and political autonomy, and the long history of persecution are not the product of Jewish moral failure, but the objective circumstances of diaspora. And Kaufmann writes, הגלות היא לא מבנה סוציאלי מיוחד, לא ריבוי רופאים ועורכי דין, לא אהבת חנויות, לא התבדלות ולא התבוללות וכולי, אלא מצב של נחר עולם, שבו נמצא הקיבוץ היהודי בעטיים של גורמים היסטוריים מסוימים, שניסיתי לברר מהותם במקום אחר, שאין איש אשם בהם. המגע בין העם הנמצא במצב של נחר עולם ובין סביבתו, הוא המוליד את השנאה לכל צורותיה וגווניה ותורותיה. The exile is not a social structure, not an excess of doctors and lawyers, not love of shops, not separation and not assimilation, but a condition of world alienhood in which the Jewish collective finds itself owing to certain historical factors for which no one is guilty. The contact between the people in the condition of world alienhood and its surroundings generates the hatred in all its forms, colors, and doctrines, and it makes no difference what occupations Jews pursue and what their social position is, and it makes no difference what their relationship to alien culture is. The Zionist aspiration does not require the acceptance of any anti-Semitic premise. It requires only the clear historical understanding that the condition of exile generates unavoidable consequences that can only be ended by ending the condition itself. And the tone of that aspiration, Kaufmann insists, must be one of dignity rather than self-abasement. He writes like this, גאולת ישראל אינה גאולת עבדים, תולעי אדם, השקועים ברפש וזוהמה, החיים חיים בלתי מוסריים, והשנואים בגלל זה על הגויים, העובדים ומתפרנסים מיגיע כפיהם. לא שאיפת חדלי אישים שנתעורר בהם רגש הנוחם והחליטו לשוב לחיות חיים מוסריים ככל הגויים. היא השאיפה לגאולה, אלא שאיפת עם להיחלץ מסבל גורל אכזרי שהוטל עליו על ידי מסיבות חייו. לא גאולה מן החטא המוסרי, אלא מן האסון הטרגי. לא עלייה מזוהמת תולעים למעלת אדם, אלא מפעל של גבורה שלא היה כמוהו. גאוות מעפילים תנו בלב הדור הצעיר, כי רק ממנה תיוולד התלוות של גאולה. The redemption of Israel is not the redemption of slaves, not of worms of the earth sunk in filth and degradation, living immoral lives and hated for that reason by the Gentiles who labor and live by the work of their hands. Not the aspiration of nullites who have been seized by remorse and have decided to begin living moral lives like all the Gentiles, but the aspiration of a people to escape the suffering of a cruel fate imposed upon it by the circumstances of its life. Not redemption from moral sin, but from tragic catastrophe. Not a rise from the defilement of worms to the dignity of human beings, but an act of heroism, the like of which has never been seen. Give not the despondency of those burdened by sin in the hearts of the young generation, but the pride of those who climb the heights, for only from it will the enthusiasm of redemption be born. At the time of its publication, Hurban ha-Nefesh caused many arguments, but its main points have lost none of their force in the centuries since it was written. The patterns of thought that Kaufmann identified, the internalization of hostile characterization, the deployment of self-criticism in the language of the enemy, the confusion between healthy national self-examination and the adoption of anti-Semitic frameworks continue to manifest in Jewish and Israel public discourse. And here at this point, we are ending this 4-part series about Yehezkel Kaufmann. I hope I managed to introduce the man, the thinker, and his important ideas which are still relevant to Zionist thinking today.